ask you, Mr. Narendra, the banker, the man who had a lot of money to loan. We have this priority sector lending concept in India in public sector banks forever. How practical is the idea of investing in a, as you said, profit plus well thought out, socially not just responsible but beneficial, impactful investing proposal for a banker? End of the day, you are the people who make or break, or you are the people who have to sign the check. And would you invest in a socially impactful investment today, or are you waiting for guidelines from government? Are we ready, the world of bankers?
If you recall that the banks were nationalized in 1969 and 1980, the whole objective is that earlier the banks were all promoted by corporates, whereas the government that time felt that for inclusive growth and for social objectives and reaching out to the masses and covering them in terms of liabilities, that is getting their savings and then getting into productive investments and getting them a means of income, the bank should be nationalized. So if you see the banking growth also, it is only after nationalization the banks have expanded substantially, and even today around 70% of the market share in terms of business is done by the public sector bank. But for the last 2-3 years of pain, but even in that, in terms of social banking or in terms of priority sector lending, in terms of loan to the marginal farmers, micro and small enterprises, or small business, on traders, that, and also the retailers, means the individuals, that loan has shown substantial increase, and it is only the corporate book has been slightly slowed down. So the fact is that even in terms of the government objective also, if we can recall that whenever the government was not able to get the necessary majority next time, they found that unless it is inclusive growth, the mere GDP growth would not make the general public any enthusiasm. So only when they found, I think sometime during that the government immediately changed their focus in inclusive growth. So even our current government that I was sharing with the professor, that as soon as our Prime Minister joined in the last term, in the 2014, he gave the call to on the 15th of August to all the banks that I would like the Jan Dhan account to be opened by the bank in a period of 3 months, 30 crores. The banks, only the public sector bank, the private sector bank were very slow in that. The public sector bank responded and opened 30 crores of Jan Dhan accounts, and 23 crores of RuPay card was issued to them. So that is where that later concept of JAM, that is Jan Dhan account, then each one having Aadhaar and mobile. So even when you asked the question how the technology, had that not been in technology, achieving this 30 crores in a 3 months time would not have been possible. So we should of course appreciate the efforts of all the public sector banks, and those 30 crores accounts are resulted in around 7 crores of government subsidy going to the directly to the DBT, that is a direct benefit transfer, and the government could save more than 1 lakh crore which were otherwise going to the wrong hands. So as far as the capitalism also, or that your industrialist, now all of them have also felt unless there is an ecosystem built in terms of social impact, their business cannot expand. So the business in terms of profitability or all other things will depend on the now very fact that currently the rural economy is not doing well. That has resulted in the slowdown in the economy.
Sorry, when you said rural economy is not doing well,
yeah,
are you meaning the urban economy is doing well?
Other economy is relatively better.
Okay.
Now urban economy people are not so much affected, whereas the rural economy, due to the drought, due to the fact that there have been not enough productive activities, as well as the overall natural calamity and all other things, and also not reaching the wealth of the industrialist or the capital going into the rural economy, even though our government under the Prime Minister's road development project, lot of roads have been generated under the NREGA, lot of productive activities. After our Prime Minister, he focused on asset creation through the NREGA. Every year around 68,000 crores are being spent on NREGA. But the fact is, it is not only a reimbursement of getting a certain days of work for them, it should result in productive assets. But currently, the available, after particularly maybe demonetization, the available funds in the informal economy has got affected. So in order to again ensure that the informal economy get into the formalization and their savings get channelized, and they are now these 30 crores accounts are all being given not only overdraft but also linkage to credit. So the focus of them is not only they get productive farming, non-farming activities like dairy farming, poultry farming, food processing or other industries, so that the employment opportunity in the rural area gets improved. Now in all that, the corporate who have the money, they have the focus, and most of the industries today in the ecosystem where they operate, they are providing all these facilities, health, education, or they are spending. So even our Prime Minister recently mentioned that the wealth creation is also very important for creating the social impact. So we cannot totally undermine the people who are creating the wealth. But the fact is that if they only create wealth and only for them, it is not suffice. And now they have been also made compulsory that the 2% of the profit should be spent on CSR. The very fact that government has been focusing that has to go in terms of very creating ground level improvement in the lives of people. And if the people's per capita income increases, then only the overall country growth can be achieved. So your question is the priority sector lending and inclusive growth, even in terms of reaching out to the masses, and the innovation actually, sir, that our UPI and BEAM has revolutionized the payment system in the country, which is again an introduction or innovation by the NPCI, our National Payment Corporation of India, under the leadership of in the government initiative also. So that has transformed today that money from one place to another can reach it, and even a common man at a very cheaper. And today recently that all the merchant establishment charges up to 50 rupees for smaller transaction are being waived, so that the common man need not incur expenditure. So I saw the interview by Professor, and there also he has appreciated that the technology under the our Aadhaar and Jandan and all that innovation which has been done, that has, even Nandan Nilekani was the man behind that, and later again developed by our current government. So what we would say that the industrialist or the capitalism or the and even now 100 lakh crores of investment is to be spent on infrastructure. Now the government saving alone will not be suffice for creating these 100 lakhs of infrastructure. There needs to be private. And luckily, the 2014 earlier, whatever public-private partnership infrastructure projects were done, there were a lot of shortcomings. And these shortcomings have been modified in terms of road projects. There were so many shortcomings, and then the government came in front, and they took up the project on their own equity and also on the EPC model. And they also, another thing is, the toll collection has been taken by the government. So in each of the sector, if you are able to take away the deficiency and focus on execution as the hallmark and ensure that public-private partnership is created, definitely there will be improvements. And recently again government
thank you so much. I'll move on.
Eminence, for institution, education institution. They have selected around 11 education institution as the education institution of eminence. So it also shows that the private sector should come in larger way in education. Yeah.
So fantastic. It's amazing how many success stories governments have to speak of, which are a mysterious secret to most citizens most of the time. But it's amazing. But I'll move on to you, Mahesh, and ask you 3 questions or 2 quick questions. You talk of taking financial solutions to the last mile, to the bottom of the pyramid. When the concepts of reaching out to bottom of pyramid, they being sustainable business, I had doubts, would people who go to the London School of Economics and Political Science or study at MIT, Princeton, Stanford, come back to India to begin with, and then go to small towns, Indian villages. But we have seen this whole cycle rather quickly, where we talked about brain drain as a threat to India, all the best people from IITs, and going away to now the threat is of too many NRIs coming back and doing lovely things, of course. So take us through this aspect of change in aspirations of professionals, people who work with you, young people who wanted to, after a good education, go and live in New York or California. Now they're saying, I'll go back to my village. Or what kind of people transformation has happened? Are the millennials really clued so much, as we keep hearing about making an impact? And do you see all this leading to a point of change where Indian villages can have aspiring entrepreneurs who can make innovations that will then come from the village to the city? Are we talking of Indian villages becoming a center of wealth creation with the kind of initiatives you're doing?
Dream job 3 years after you graduate. All of the students wrote something like, we want to be a hedge fund manager. Those days that were popular, create wealth and all that. 3 months later, he gave us another assignment where he said, imagine you are dead and your friends and family are sitting around your dead body. What would you ideally like to hear that they want to talk about you? Then after a couple of months, he said, why there is a disconnect between the first answer and the final answer? Because when we say that we are dead and gone, we want to be recognized as a good person, created a lot of good things, made a lot of charity work, all that sort of thing. But the fundamental point that I later came to know is that, as Professor was articulating, it doesn't have to be a disconnect. Doing good can be profitable. Then I came to understand about the microfinance, spent time with Professor Yunus in Bangladesh. Then came and under the tutelage of Dr. Abdul Kalam, I mentioned that technology, the California speak, can do a lot of wonders. He listened to me and said, Mahesh, you go and see some 60 villages. Probably he did his homework and said, these are the villages, go and come back. I thought I'll come back in a month, and it took me more than a year. I became a little humble. Because when you go and see what is really happening, then you actually realize your solution has to be based on the customer's need. And that actually led us to understand how to think from a customer perspective. And that actually also led me to experiment. And towards the experiment, I understood that if you have a scale, let's say you have 1 million customer, it is definitely profitable. And we all know from a fixed cost perspective, it doesn't grow according to the number of customers. So once we actually crossed that threshold, in about 4 years' time, we were actually very profitable, and we continue to service about 4.7 million customers, transferring about $1 billion of government to citizen benefits, use the Aadhaar for identification, use the core banking, implementation of Jan Dhan Yojana, so on and so forth. And what we found every time when we actually give a tablet computer to a villager who may or may not have actually had the college qualification, is that they actually tell us how better creatively this can be used. And the other important thing that I understood is when we operate at that level, we got to actually understand frugal innovation. So it's not just, I think, doing things that could actually be lifted from a Western concept and implemented here, but we need to actually adapt to the lowest cost of transaction, which can then benefit and also give margin for you. As long as you have a contribution margin, it's a matter of time that you be able to do this. While I was actually doing all this, I just take a minute to actually interestingly understand one concept which I was actually going through when I read the book, thanks to Ellen Garu. In fact, this book itself, as Dr. Prabhakar was saying, can be summarized into a 3P and 5P, and that actually led to me to think about those who are familiar with statistics know that when the p-value is a hypothesis which helps you determine the significance of your results. So the first P, the partnership itself, talks about public, private and philanthropic sectors, and that is exactly what we have actually end up doing. We are working with the governments, the public sector banks, the NGOs and the CSR funds, but primarily we are actually driven through equity capital, which is a private investment that happens in our company. So I think that model actually works, and if we could apply the same thing for any major problems, whether it's healthcare, education, which was mentioned, I believe that we could actually come up with more solutions. It may not be applicable to everything, but for majority of it, it could apply. And one other thing which I wanted to actually mention, that we started with a renowned politician, then we moved to the professor, then to the Dr. Prabhakar, and then a very provocative moderator. So everything actually starts with P, but I think that it is a very positive note. I would actually say it's my pleasure and privilege that I'm getting into this. And one final remark, my investors today ask for ESG, which stands for environment, social and governance. And if we don't have that in our DNA, then our investors are concerned. So I think there are impact investors. There are investors who actually look at doing good is profitable. It is not doing good versus being profitable.
Round of applause, happily. I mean, we are of the view that all of you will start making socially relevant, impactful investments. It will be very unconvincing if you don't clap wholeheartedly, you know, for somebody's money. So go back to you and you speak about it and describe it in the book. The problem of measurements are very crucial. Everybody except God brings data. Measuring of businesses in a profit context, reasonably easy, reasonably straight, I'm not straightforward, reasonably, you know, we know accounting has many meanings, but reasonably accountable. You have listed a few measures for measuring social impact. Would you expound on that, saying, if somebody wishes to start an enterprise which is social, somebody would like to invest in it, what are the kind of measures they should look at to know whether this will succeed? Is it performing well?
So, another great question by you, another chapter for your book. I think the way you lay it out is very, very important, very profound. So, we all know there are flaws in our financial measurement, but we have standards, we have lots of observers, we have lots of accounting, so you can get a pretty good fix on the financial situation of an investment. On the social side, not so much. And I think there are two problems here. The first one is defining what your goal is. So we say profit with a purpose. Well, we know what profit means, but what's the purpose? And that's question one. What is the goal of the healthcare system? And maybe there are multiple goals, right? But what is our objective if we want to improve public health in the city? So first of all, it's clear definition of what the goal is. And then the second level becomes, how do you measure that? So is it lives saved? Is it degrees earned? Is it standardized tests? So that's two. Those two are hard. The last one is where the formula comes in the book. Once you do that, once you identify what your goal is and how you will measure success, the formula that we have laid out lets you compare different approaches to that objective. So it's limited, but I think valuable because it brings in the third factor, and that is, it's not just about knowing what you want to do, and how you measure it, it's also what does it cost. So there may be 3 different ways to provide elementary education in Hyderabad. They agree on the goal is to get every child in this community to the 6th grade level. Ultimately, we hammer out how we measure that. What are the tests? But then the last question is, what's the most efficient way of doing that? Do we want charter schools? Do we want public schools? Do we want the Khan Academy? Do we want whole school homeschooling? Do we bring in? So the third point that has to be achieved as we move into this world of social impact is comparing different approaches.
In this, I'd like to just take you to the specific example, the mayor of Indianapolis, who believed that there must be competition of government projects and contracts by simultaneously private players, government agencies and PPPs. Is that kind of a competition viable? And this case study caught my attention because apparently a couple of decades back, Indianapolis was suffering from potholes. Now, I being from Hyderabad, I don't know what a pothole is, but it would be nice if you could tell us, did the mayor succeed by making government agencies compete with private players and PPPs simultaneously? Does it increase efficiency, lower cost, as you said, within the collaborative context?
So the answer is yes. The answer is yes and no, right? I think the concept is a good one, right? The concept is, let's not make a political or philosophical decision and say government is better than the private sector or the social sector. So we've done that a lot. So we decide, well, fire prevention should be by the government, and that's it. And there may be reasons, and that may be correct. But what the mayor in this particular case said, well, the garbage collection, the government could do that, a for-profit could do that, a non-profit. So we know what the goal is, we know how to measure it. Let's just put it out for bid and let the government bid too. And let's see who comes up with the best deal with the same measurement. And I think as a professor, I love that. This is great. This is a good idea and can take the politics out of the decision. The process is time consuming and expensive. So if you think about it, if we took every service that's in the government and competed it out over time, it would take a very long time. It would cost a lot of money. So I think it's more of an Einstein thought experiment. We should think that through first and then can make a decision which ultimately I think might lead to where we are in a lot of these areas, which there's room for all. Let's have some straight public schools. Let's have some charter schools run by nonprofits. Let's bring in the Khan Academy. Let's have some international providers. And then let's have some for-profits. And let's decide based on what the results are. Results not just in terms of learning, employment, cost, and the like.
Now convinced of making at least one impact investment, however big or small, this year. Such nice people. I am very optimistic about the world. One of the most beautiful things he talks about is this, and that's the reason I would like to request all of you, no matter how enlightening this conversation might feel, it is no substitute for the value of reading the book itself. He speaks about how, rather two authors speak about, there is a sense of despondency today in the world that some problems have no solutions. Climate change, income inequality, extreme poverty. And this approach could perhaps start giving us the optimism we hope by showcasing tangible solutions at different levels. Optimism is the note on which Mr. Warren Buffett writes, a note we as a country will be celebrating the 150th anniversary of the father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi, who described himself as, I am a optimist realist. So there is a sense of optimism. So I'd like to ask you this question, corporate social responsibility. As I begin to think of who is given to us as a hope over a period of 70 years of India's independence, we know the villains, money lenders, bankers. They said, I'm giving a context of professor from Indian movies, like you begin with the movies that kind of made everybody fear Central Park. The movies found the money lender to be a bad person, the capitalist, the profit-seeking, greedy fellow as a villain throughout. But the hero has kept changing. The hero was the farmer once upon a time, then the soldier, then the scientist, then the teacher, then now it's the do-gooder returns from California. Not just Shah Rukh Khan in Swadesh, but across. Tell me, how long will this hero hold? Do you really begin to believe corporate social responsibility has really become a belief in most corporates, or is it just that nice page in a brochure? Or you think it's just a 2% nuisance tax imposed by nobody we know? Yes.
I think that's a great question. What I would like to begin is basically the consciousness to bring impact to the society is in every human being. That's a fundamental thing all of us need to realize and recognize. It's the awakening that somebody needs to do. The problem is actually getting bigger and bigger and bigger, day by day. The longer that you don't actually address the set of problems that are plaguing us, the bigger the problems are becoming. When the problem is bigger and it becomes gigantic in size, you need a player that's big enough to start the change. That's where governments come in. Now, I would put everybody into three categories. Somebody voluntarily doing it, right? So that voluntary thing existed since the mankind ever existed on this planet. Now, in some cases, it's really voluntary. You and I will go and then give some change to the society. In some cases, religions do bring in, you know, all of us, except for the atheists, right? All of us, in some ways, contribute through the name, in the name of the religion, do contribute in a lot many ways that you can actually think of. And then you have the extreme left wing. I don't know, left wing as in, not as in
that
left and right.
That side or this side.
Right.
He
right.
looks left from here, from their perspective is right. So.
Right. That left wing needs to be goaded, needs to be, you know, literally shaken up to get out of their slumber, to recognize the problem and then partake in that process. Right? That's where the, you know, 2% that you're thinking of or you're talking, you're referring to, that's where the 2% comes in. That is not to impose a penalty or a tax in some wonderful way on corporates. It's actually make them wake up from their slumber, recognize that, awaken that feeling that they probably had, you know, hidden in them. When they get up and then realize they may be the best ones that you have in terms of contributors that they were otherwise not participating earlier, right? So you are now shaking the tree up to make sure that the slumber is gone, and then they, you know, come participate in these movements that the world needs. And then you have the middlemen, not as in middlemen in the trade, who always are doing already today. They are taking those corporate social responsibility without taking the name. You see so many schools getting adopted in Hyderabad and in so many states. You know, take SIX for example. You know, that last mile connectivity is a global problem. It's not easy for somebody to take that brave heart and then attempt. He said it took 4 years. In 4 years, I think hundreds and thousands of enterprises would have been dead. Very few people actually have that muscle and the willpower to stay put through that journey. And then so many examples you will find it, right? The attempt here that we have done in, you know, providing our technology partnership with Equippp is to bring that awareness you know, in the traditional societies, you show an example, a model, and then so many people are willing to walk that path. So many people are willing, so many corporates wanting to go that path. They're waiting for that, you know, you said, you know, father of the nation, Gandhi, to, you know, stand there and, you know, do the call. Maybe, you know, you need, you know, Bill Gates and, you know, books from Professor Eimicke, you know, come out and then bring in that awaken feeling for everybody, for all of us to, you know, recognize, really participate. And Equippp, for that matter, does the same thing. It brings in various possible alternatives onto a platform for everybody to see. Today, you know, I was just talking to Professor Eimicke. The biggest challenge all of us have is, you know, I would like to contribute, but I don't know, am I contributing to the right cause, right? Who would be that person who would put their ISI mark or international standard mark and say, you know, this is the project that I have seen and I have actually experienced. These guys do bring in change. A lot more participation will happen. I think Equippp is now getting that hallmark with the books that are getting released. You know, Professor Eimicke has done a fantastic job here bringing in the so-called bad examples so that people don't walk that path, and then the good examples people will certainly emulate and then attempt at. And, you know, Botri is really proud to be part of that journey.
Thank you so much, Ramakrishna. Now, absolutely last question from my side, and then I'll open it up for some questions from some of you in 2-3 minutes. Be forewarned, I'll define my terms very clearly. You will not give a speech disguised as a question. The question, as I say, means one sentence only, ending in a question mark. That we will take. If you're directing your question to anybody besides Professor Eimicke, please do mention it. So I'll come to you in a couple of minutes. The absolute last question. In the next 50 years, Professor, if you could be the clairvoyant for me for a minute, how do you see this scope of various categories of powers in the society, government, non-profits, individuals, entrepreneurs, philanthropists, communities themselves coming together and transforming and solving problems as they keep arising? Take us to a very 50th anniversary of social value investing, when not all but some of you young people will be there to perhaps see.
Maybe we will be too. If medicine keeps advancing, who knows?
Absolutely.
I mean, I say this to my students all the time, and I'll say it to you, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. As I look back at what the world looked like when I was in elementary school, now I didn't understand what the world was like then, but if I look back at that world and look at the world today with all its crises and all its flaws, if I had a time machine and I could go back to the people who were around then and tell them what 2019 would be like, anywhere, India, Singapore, Russia, whatever, they would think I was crazy, because they would say, it is not possible that by that point in the future that life would be so good for so many. And I will debate with anyone in this room how valid that is, because it is. So as I look forward from 2019 to 2070, I am wildly optimistic. I really am. I think the potential is enormous, and I think what we write about in the book is a large part of what's happening already. What's happening already in India. And we're only looking at just the beginnings of what the trajectory is. So can we screw it up? Absolutely. Absolutely. We have some leaders around the world, I won't name, but I know one in particular, you know, who could destroy the entire world in the next 3 years. But God willing, next year, that person won't be around anymore. I mean, I wish he would not be around at all, but at least he might not be head of a nation. But I think all the pieces are there, and what it requires is something, again, that I've seen we're doing better and better, and that's cooperating around the globe. And climate change, again, these are enormous problems, but we are making progress. I mean, I'll just leave with one last example, because it happened just recently, the fires in the rainforest in Brazil. First of all, let's get a grip. That's been happening all over the world for a long, long time. So yes, it's terrible, yes, it's horrible. I'm not saying I don't care, but the fact is, it's been happening and no one seemed to care. And now the same thing happens and the entire world is on top of it. The entire world is saying this must stop. So I think that situation to me crystallizes how far we have come. And I think, again, if we all are willing to work together, I think what we can achieve will be astounding.
Yeah, my name is Satya. It has been a great thing. Will help us realize that trade means great relationships, and how do you make the effort to get the globalization and liberalization train back on track? That's for you.
That's for you, sir. Yeah.
And I'm going to end by saying what Winston Churchill had said in 1945. He said, and this is not meant to be humiliating, he says, the Americans always do the right thing, but only after doing everything else.
Well, I agree with you. My own view is that globalization has been enormously beneficial for everyone in the world. It has, and it doesn't mean that there aren't pluses and minuses. If you sum it all up, it's been good for all of us. I think the role of government in society is critically important, and you know, I hope the book doesn't come across like we're saying government's outmoded and needs to be diminished. I think government needs to be focused, and government needs to be focused on regulation. And I think trade is a good example. So trade shouldn't be, just like capitalism unfettered is not a good idea, trade unfettered is not a good idea either. There needs to be rules. The good part of the recent debates is that there does need to be rules. But how you come to a way of getting the rules and making them fair needs to be done in a very different way. So again, I'm hopeful that some of the players in the leadership roles around the world will change in some places. I think we all have to, I think we all should be a little bit more understanding of how difficult it is to be a leader, and how all leaders are people. So they're all flawed. You know, now in retrospect, Churchill, everywhere I go in the world, I say, name 5 great leaders. It's always Churchill, right? He's always in the top 5. He was a pretty flawed person who failed a lot, right? And right after the war got voted out of office because nobody trusted him to run a peace economy. So I think we need to be a little bit understanding of the fact that all of our leaders, the good ones and the bad ones, have their problems. That's why we have democracy. That's why we have term limits. So I think you and I are in the same place. I'd just say one last thing, and it's a good example of where governments have failed, even though the technology was good. 2, right off the top of the bed. I don't just name names. I mean, Uber, Airbnb. The idea of using technology to make ride sharing more accessible and cheap is great. The way they did it couldn't have been more wrong, and the current reality couldn't be more screwed up. Airbnb enabling people to make their homes available and share their homes, wow, sounds great. Creating hotels. We have housing. Part of the reason why we have an affordable housing crisis in New York City is because rich people are buying up affordable housing and creating secret hotels with no safety and no control. So there's a great idea that can be and will be harnessed but is running loose a while because government isn't playing its role. So government's key. It's just that government has to be a little bit different.
So my name is Silvia Smetana. I'm from Austria but living in Hyderabad. So my question relates to social impact investing. And the question is, why is it so difficult for an organization who is bringing women into top positions, boardrooms and C-suites, to get social impact investing? That is my question. And the context is, as we know that big companies like PricewaterhouseCoopers, KPMG, McKinsey, all have done studies that having more women in top leadership is actually profiting, is bringing more profit into companies. It has also an impact on business culture in a positive way. And still, it is very difficult when you go to impact investors and talk about it with them. They basically say it's great, great initiative, verbal, total support. But the feedback is go to women like Indra Nooyi and ask them for money because you're not going to make any profit. And I want to question that assumption. I think it is possible to make profit and have an impact, as you said also. So my question to you all is, why is it so difficult to find investors, social impact investors, who want to support this cause?
If social investing was so awesome as it is, and if the millennials, the world at large needs it, why then are such ideas which can make an impact finding it difficult to get those investors? Where is the gap?
The panelists are much more knowledgeable than me, but I'll just give you my one example. That's why our sponsors are here. I think we will not succeed with impact investing until we make it directly available from people who have the product to investors who want to invest. It will never work by going to GE and saying, I want a social impact opportunity, will you become one? Will you move in that direction? I think that's never going to happen. But there are many companies out there. There's a company that I'm involved in. It's just one example. It's called IX Investments. Howard is a co-founder of it. And the whole purpose of that business is to create a Berkshire Hathaway of social impact companies, so that it's like a platform. It's bringing together as many as you can. There are so many good impact investments out there, you just don't know about them, right? And it's impossible for you to find them. So we have to find ways through internet-based platforms that are vetted and qualified and over time developed a reputation that you as a potential investor can go there and see agricultural companies, environmental protection companies, affordable housing companies that are around the world. They're functioning, they're out there, they need capital, they could grow. I think that, in my view, I think that's the way it's going to happen. You're not really in the long run going to change the existing array of media companies, of transportation companies, of housing companies. They're not going to change. I don't think so. They're not built that way. And my last example to sum it up, and it's from my family, so I shouldn't do it. I probably shouldn't do it, but I'm going to do it. So Warren Buffett makes exactly that point. He says, I know how to run businesses that make a profit. I don't know how to run businesses that make a profit and do social impact. I don't know. So I'm going to take all the money I made and I'm going to give it to Bill and Melinda Gates, who know how to do it, and they'll do it, and they will bring in partners. So he, in his own way, I think he makes my point, or he taught me the point. We have to start to invest in new enterprises that are coming from the impact position from the beginning, right? They want to make money, they want to get rich, but they also want to make the world a better place at the same time. It's in their DNA. So we just have to find a way to get those companies on everybody's radar screen And if we do, it's like Amazon. They'll grow like wild. Those little companies that are successful, if you give them the capital, they'll be big companies in 3 or 4 years.
There are two sides of our best efforts and intentions. Silos still exist between the public sector, private sector, and the NGOs. So how would you tweak the economic system in a way that they function towards maximizing the social impact without compromising on the profit? Because if you can do that, I think it's going to be one of the greatest macroeconomic experiments in the entire history of the world.
How would you break down the silos that still exist between governments, non-profits, private sector companies, etc., and bring them to optimize efforts for impact?
So obviously it's for-profit businesses who got together because they felt that the economy as a whole was being constrained by the low quality of the local governments, in part because of corruption, in part because of poor accounting systems, processes. So not as the businesses, but as individuals, they pooled a large amount of money as a fund to improve local governments around the country. And then they went to local governments and the population and said, we would like to hire for you the best consultants in the country to improve your budgetary system, to create participation with the public, to create an internet system where citizens can watch budget meetings and participate and have a voice, to improve your permit systems, all as charity, with their vision that if they made the government better, it would be better for business. And if you have a chance, you can read the chapter in the book and see how beneficial it is. Local governments all across Brazil, which is not as big as India, but smart business people, the government, and engagements of citizens can solve what has been in Brazil an intractable problem for 100 years, which is the low quality of local governments. So I think there always has, in my view, there always has to be leadership. There always has to be a catalyst. Sometimes the catalyst is the government, like Modi with Ahar. Sometimes it's like in Brazil with private business people. And sometimes, like Central Park in New York City, it's a group of private citizens who come together and say, we cannot tolerate the current environment, it must change. And they catalyze the collaboration. So each case is different, each place is different, but there needs to be an external spark of leadership.
Good evening, and I'm Chandrima. I am an entrepreneur, and we do a lot of work in public healthcare and digital healthcare. So my question is to Professor. Do you see a new order of the world in business? Do you see social entrepreneurship with commercial profits be a new order? Number one. And since anything social definitely has got a link with women who are also very compassionate. Okay, do you feel women entrepreneur taking a center stage and doing well?
Well, let me try to give you two quick answers. Women in power have changed the world already and are changing the world all over the place. I know in my school, when I started there several decades ago, the population of women getting graduate degrees in management were about 2 to 4%. It's now 60% of our program are women. So the trajectory is pretty easy to see. The women in decision-making positions in the government, in the private sector, in philanthropy, they will take over just by sheer numbers. And I do believe a woman's point of view is different than a man's, and in many cases, particularly in terms of social impact, in general, better. So long run, very optimistic. I think we are in a different world in terms of opportunities for entrepreneurship because of platforms, because of the internet and the ease of communication. I mean, literally, we can, you can, anyone can reach almost everybody on the planet instantaneously for no cost. Who would have ever thought, right? But we're there. So if you come up with a good idea that works in Hyderabad, it is conceivable that that idea could spread globally within a year or two. And I think that's what is going to happen as we expand platforms for this kind of activity and give investors the chance to invest in things that without this new internet and platform approach, you would have never even known about. So I'm very optimistic.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor.
ఎక్కడైతే సేవా తత్పరత ఉంటుందో దానికి ప్రాఫిట్ అంటే వ్యాపారవేత్తలకి అలాగే ప్రభుత్వాలకి సేవ చేసే వాళ్ళందరికీ కూడా అనుసంధానం సమన్వయం సయోధ్య గనక కుదిరితే అది నిజంగానే మానవాళి సమాజంగా
I think Ellen has invested. You all have come together and added the social context, and Prof. Eimicke, it's a privilege with your knowledge, with your research, with your book. You have brought the value, social value investing. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thought-provoking discussion. So just to sum up, whether all profit has purpose or not, all purpose can certainly have profit. So let's go back home with this think tank. I request Mr. Ellen, who is Lakshmi Narayan actually, to please give the vote of thanks.
Presented here, I would like to start my vote of thanks with triple P's. Your presence, patience, and participation in software investing in Philanthropists India. Thank you, Ananda, again. Personally, thanks Mr. B Eimicke, who has kindly agreed my request to visit India to launch this book in India and give it to our Indian stakeholders, corporations, who are our government is making it as a CSR as an obligation. At this juncture, it is appropriate to give a framework also, and I requested Dr. Parakal Prabhakar Garu, despite of his busy schedule, has agreed, and I requested him to make active measurements or framework setting up the impact investments, not only for the corporates, lot of non-resident Indians who are doing lot of things in India, but these things has to be bring it in one particular platform. I joined with Boltree to put it in the one particular platform by any individuals or corporations and initiate a dialogue between them. So thank you one and all who presented here. My personal thanks to Mahesh Ramachandran Garu, who is leaving to UK tomorrow, London, so has agreed to join with us. His CIGS is the best example for the impact investing. He has been doing this job, and his team is also doing the same thing with the same spirit. I had good opportunity to spending time with them, and it is really good. Thanks Mahesh Garu, and my senior friend and advisor, mentor, brother and everything, Narendra Garu, who was a veteran banker. So despite of his busy schedule, he came today. So he's always there. It's a 2 decades friendship with him. So any good cause, whenever we are doing it, he will be there. Thanks Narendra Garu personally. And Sriram Karigaru, so who has recently joined in
taken a charge as a resident editor in Deccan Chronicle. When I approached him, I was very skeptical that the way he's been revamping the entire organization and spending time, whether he may be coming in time or not, but he came and well prepared, but he made it the day very, very fine way. Thanks, Sriram Gari Garu. And finally, my team both tree, Archana and Muni, Ramakrishna Garu, who are all participated here, and Swapna Garu, who has hosted this event very meticulously, and Sirasri, my friend, who is always been there for every activity, whatever I've been doing it, and Varsha from Bodhtree team, and my friend Chandra Luri from Virginia, who came, and he has been spending enormous time on whatever I've been asking in any content or any activity. He's been supporting me, and Sri Petana Satyanarayan Garu, who is a driving force for the since last 4 or 5 months. He's been actively involving and supporting this initiative to next level. Thanks for his presence today. And my entire team, Angru's partners, who are in spirit. Some of them are participating, but Madhu, and some of them are Sylvia, and Pingali family, and everybody is there. Thank you very much. One and all thanks, and particularly print and electronic media, who are in spirit. They are there, some of them, but friends, since last 4 hours you have been here. Thank you very much. Equippp Foundation, this is the first initiative we have started. Hardly 5 months back only we have made this foundation to circulate precious literature to the appropriate stakeholders. To start with social value investing book, I wanted to give it to everyone with the professor's signature, if his time permits, for 50 people. Thank you.